Good morning, everybody. We'll start out our morning with have Rich take roll.
Good morning. Chairman, Representative Kelly is present. Vice Chair, Representative Hoheisel is present. Ranking Minority Member, Representative Hsu is present. Representative Anderson is present. Representative Baker is present. Representative Bergkamp is present. Representative Day is present. Representative Donahoe is present. Representative Finney. Representative Kessler is present. Representative Lynn is present. Representative Neely is present remote. Representative Poskin. Representative Samsel. Representative Topliker is present. Representative Wassinger is present. Representative Weigel is excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. And we will start out, have two things on the agenda for this morning. And then just before we get that underway, I'll tell you that looking into Wednesday and to next week, a lot of stuff going on Wednesday and next Monday and Wednesday. So plan that we will finish out our remaining three meetings with meeting each of those days and working on some things, and there'll be more information that comes out to you. But just so you'll have that on your script, and most of those. I think those are the days that we want to be sure, and just because of what could come up that might require votes, that need to have everyone either here in person or inside the State House if you're going to attend remotely. So you can just put that on your, kind of down in your notes, and we'll know that next week will be a fairly active week. So today, we'll call our meeting officially to order, and the first action of business is action on House Bill 2236, which was the appraisal bill and the exclusion of sales comparisons for unique residential real estate property in rural communities. And so to have a refresher on the bill, and I think we're going to have our reviser, Amelia Kovar Donahue, to give us kind of a recap on this bill and discuss some of the things that we had talked about and potential answers to those.
Mr. Chairman, this is David.
Yes.
I can go ahead and just kind of review the bill real fast. I think Amelia's on here. If there's any particular questions, we get deep into appraisal stuff. But House Bill 2236, this was the bill that would allow that if in developing appraisal of residential real property identified as unique in style or square footage in a rural county for the purpose of a mortgage transaction, if the sales comparison approach cannot be developed for a credible opinion or indication of value due to a lack of comparables within 30 miles of the property, the appraiser may perform the appraisal without completing the sales comparison approach. In the appraisal report, the appraiser is required to provide an explanation of the reasons for the exclusion of the sales comparison approach and document efforts to obtain comparable sales or market data. A financial institution shall not decline to proceed with a mortgage finance transaction due to the exclusion of the sales comparison approach in accordance with this section. And the definition of rural county for purposes of this bill is any county with a population less than 10,000 in Kansas. That's kind of just the review of the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, David, are you going to cover any of the issues that kind of came up in between research and revisers came to some conclusions on those?
Yeah, I think there was some concern of on USPAP and some other federal regulations relating to appraisals that are required under the federal regs. In this situation, I mean, this is a May. Under the bill in 2236, the appraiser may do this if there's, if they feel in their professional judgment there's not, sales within those 30 miles. If for some reason they would go out and say, well, if we go to 40 or 50 miles, I can find, comparables, they can do that. So it's very much a discretionary thing. And there is also in USPAP, there is a jurisdictional exception rule in there. If there is a local jurisdictional, state law or something that requires a different approach than would be under that, then they can cite to that statute, that law in the report, and just identify that and say why they did that, because it's based on the state law. So there shouldn't be a concern under this in regard to that, because they still have to they still have to do the appraisal. It's just there's a potential different method of doing it. It's not exempting it completely from the requirement to do an appraisal. It's just you don't necessarily have to do the sales comparison approach in these circumstances.
Okay, any questions for David? Thanks, David. How about from research? Any comments or anything there? I know that some of the comments that David made came from research looking into surrounding states and what were some potential issues to look at in those states, and just wondered if you have any comments.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Andrew Finzen here with KLRD.
Yes, Andrew.
I think that you and Revisor Weiss covered the content pretty substantially there. We were just KLRD was doing a review of surrounding states in the region, and in reaching out to some of those other rural appraiser organizations, had made contact with some of those agency heads, and some of them had indicated some concerns with USPAP or federal code, potential conflicts, but just in conversation with our revisor's office, they had indicated that the language in the code or in the bill is more permissive and is not requiring an appraiser to take this action, so there shouldn't be any conflict. So that was just how we discovered those concerns and the way we went about addressing them with the revisor's office.
Any questions for Andrew? Thank you very much. Okay. After the review of the bill and all, is there want to move ahead, is there a motion concerning House Bill 2236? Representative Hoheisel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we pass HB 2236 out favorably.
Is there a second? Second from Representative Shue. And when we do that, appreciate that. I do have one amendment that I would like to propose to add. And David, would you be able to shoot that out and talk about it? But it concerns just, maybe it's belt and suspenders or not, but I know one of the questions that came up was about potential issues if the loans were going to be guaranteed or sold in the secondary market, that it would need the sales comparison approach. And so, David, and then also, did you make that amendment available to Rich also so he can email it out to Rich Merkin? Okay, so you should have that, but David, could you kind of explain this particular amendment? David, or,
David, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Um, so like go to section, line 16. This is the last sentence there. A financial institution shall not decline to proceed with a finance transaction due to the exclusion of the sales comparison approach in accordance with this section. Just adding a little bit of an exception here to say that unless the sales comparison approach is required in order for such mortgage finance transaction loan to be guaranteed or sold in the secondary market. So if in the financial institution's judgment as they're putting together the loan, if they wanted to then actually bundle that, sell it on the secondary market, or there's some necessary guarantee, then they could decline to proceed, if they don't have the sales comparison approach. So it's just it's a little bit an exception to the general rule here in the bill for these specific instances for loans.
questions? And Representative Toplicker?
Okay, so I understand the proposed amendment, but what happens again if they cannot do the, well, get this out of the way real quick, okay? If you cannot do, it says unless the sales comparison approach is required. So what if there isn't any, like the bill is addressing, if there isn't any comparison, but then you're going to say, unless the sales comparison approach is required, and there isn't any comparison?
Yeah,
You
well,
do.
I would imagine that most times a comparison could be found farther away than 30 miles, and it would just be in the secondary market. If your intention was to sell that loan or seek a guarantee, you could not get it if you didn't have the sales comparison approach. So there would be no use to go through initially for an appraiser to not put it in if the intention was known that the loan would be either guaranteed or was going to be sold in the secondary market. So I think from some of the research that was done, the likelihood that they could not come up with the sales comparison approach is probably small, but that would be just something that would be another step, that if they received the appraisal and it didn't have it, and the intention was to sell it or guarantee it, they'd have to go back and do that piece of the puzzle. So this would just say, if the intention is known that it's going to be sold or guaranteed, that the appraiser would not skip that step, that they could go ahead and hunt for a comparison. How about any other questions at all? Okay. We have the amendment. Is there a second? Have a second by Representative Hoheisel. Any additional discussion on the amendment? Representative Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on this bill, sometimes we do things that have unintended consequences. And I think we'll have to really think about that as we go forward before we take final action on this bill. The issue of trying to determine the value of a commercial building in some of these small rural communities is very, very difficult. Oh, it's just residential? Answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I will close on my amendment, and we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the amendment to add the exception for sales or guarantees signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Opposed, nay. Okay, the amendment passes and we're back on the bill. Do we have a motion for the bill as amended? Representative Hoheisel moves that in favor of the bill as amendment. Do we have a second? Representative Shue seconds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, thanks very much. And
Mr. Chair, I request that my vote be reflected.
okay, have a request from Representative Hoheisel to record his vote. Anyone else wish their vote recorded? See any hands up on the screen at all? Okay. Then please record Representative Hoheisel's vote, and House Bill 2236 then is passed out favorably. Our next item on the agenda this morning is a hearing on Senate Bill 178. And Senate Bill 178 is coming to us from the Office of the State Bank Commissioner on trust company charter conversions. And David, could you give us a review of this bill, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senate Bill 178 would amend provision of state banking code relating to organization and supervision of banks and trust companies by adding language allowing any national bank, federal savings association, or federal savings bank to convert to a state trust company, and then vice versa. So allowing trust companies to then state trust companies to convert to those national financial institutions. Under current law, banks have the ability to convert from state to national charters and from national to state charters, but trust companies do not. The bill also prohibits any person who has been convicted of any felony or any crime involving dishonesty or a breach of trust from serving as a director, officer, or employee of a state bank or state trust company. Currently, that prohibition only applies to banks, so we're just adding the trust companies to that as well under the bill. The bill becomes effective upon publication in the statute book on July 1 of this year. The Senate Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance did make an amendment to the bill. They added language requiring the name selected for the state trust company to be different or substantially dissimilar from any other trust company doing business in the state. And then the Senate on final action did pass the bill 39-0 on March 3rd, 2021. I could stay for any questions.
Any questions for David on Senate Bill 178? Representative Toplicker?
So was current law just silent on trust companies?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the current law, if you kind of look at the bill, it just only talked about banks, and it just didn't have the trust company in there. So that's kind of what's being done, kind of on the underlying bill. So adding state trust companies, throughout those sections to then conform that with the current law regarding banks and trust companies or trust companies.
That answer your question, Representative Toplicker? Okay, thanks. Any other questions for David? Okay, thank you, David. We do have a fiscal note in the packet of information. The State Bank Commissioner's Office is the one that is involved in this bill, and they show no fiscal effect because of implementing this bill. So that's one of the rare ones that no cost shown. So it's positive. Any comments from research at all on this particular bill? Don't see any, so we will move ahead, and we will open our hearing on Senate Bill 178. And this will start with the proponents. And the proponents, it looks like we have one and in person, and that's Melissa Wangeman, General Counsel, Office of the State Bank Commissioner. Welcome, Melissa. Very snappy mask you have this morning.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm trying to match here. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's nice to be back in front of the committee this year. Also with me is Scott Lowry, who's the Director of the Trust Division at the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. David's already given you a pretty good overview of the bill. The basis for the bill arose last summer when we had a national bank inquire whether it could come into our state as a state trust company. And while reviewing the law for this transaction, we realized that the Kansas Banking Code does not allow a national bank to convert to a state trust company. The banking code only allows national banks to convert to state banks. We did discuss this issue with the Kansas Bankers Association, and they in turn talked to their trust experts. And between us all, we didn't find any policy reason for the omission of trust companies from the conversion statute. We reasoned that it was probably because it's just an oversight in the statutory language because the laws relating to trust companies were written later than the banking code. So the corrections to the conversion process can be found in sections 1 and 2 of the bill. And while working on the bill's language relating to those conversions, we found some other statutes that we thought should probably include the word trust company as well. Section 1 of the bill relates to a state bank's articles of incorporation, and Section 4 relates to persons who've been convicted of felonies, and it prohibits them from serving inside a state bank. And both those sections were amended in this bill to add a state trust company as well. And then lastly, you know, it's always embarrassing to admit a mistake, especially one made while drafting your own bill, but we managed to do it. Our office did make a mistake with our bill language. The name requirements for a state bank are different than the name requirements for a state trust company, and we missed that in our draft. So I have attached the amendment that we proposed on the Senate side, and it recognizes the two standards for names between state banks and state trust companies. And we did ask the Senate committee to make the amendment, and the language is just a little bit off. It's kind of in the wrong place. So David has redrafted it, and I appreciate it. He shared it with me. It's perfect. It's correct. It places it where it needs to be. So we would humbly ask the House committee to move it up a couple of lines and make that amendment. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you just go over the difference between a state national bank and a state national trust?
Yes. Well, we have state banks and we have state trust companies. And you probably know a state bank when you see it's a depository institution. A trust company holds things in trust and acts as a fiduciary. Okay, so national banks, okay, there's really not a national trust company. It's really a national bank that has trust powers. So basically, and they're usually called national associations. If you've ever seen them advertised, you'll see the NA after their name. So you have national banks and national savings and associations as well, whatever else is listed in the statute. But you don't have a national trust company. It's more like a national bank with trust powers. I'm checking to see if Scott nods his head. Does that sound right, Scott? Okay.
Scott, is he talking? Is he going to say something? You might be muted, Scott. We can't hear you.
Scott, do you need to add anything to my answer?
No, I don't. Melissa, you answered it very well. I think you informed the committee of the differences between
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Melissa gets a gold star for the day.
Are there any questions for Melissa? Yep, Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two very related but kind of separate questions. Was there anything coming down the pipeline that necessitated this change? And how often is this conversion going to be used? Do you guys anticipate?
Well, the premise for it was we were approached by a national bank from out of state. It would have been nice to attract a national bank into the state of Kansas and to switch their charter from the OCC at the national, or at the federal level to the state office of the state bank commissioner. But we couldn't do it under the current law. There is a way through mergers and several transactions to get there. So we're hoping, anticipating at least one entity may take another look at coming to Kansas. But in terms of how often we'll see it, I can't give you a reasonable answer on that.
Any other questions for Melissa? I don't see anything up on the screen as it is. Assume that there aren't then, Melissa. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today.
Well, that is the only oral proponent that I have for Senate Bill 178. Is there anyone else that would wish to speak as a oral proponent for Senate Bill 178? If not, I show no written testimony for Senate Bill 178. Anyone have anything else on as a proponent of Senate Bill 178? If not, that will close our proponent portion of the hearing, and we will open up the neutral portion of the hearing. And I have no one listed as either oral or written as a neutral on this bill. Anyone wish to speak as neutral on Senate Bill 178? If not, we'll close the neutral portion of the hearing and open up the opponent portion of the hearing. And I have no one listed either orally or written as a opponent of Senate Bill 178. Anyone wish to speak as an opponent to Senate Bill 178? If not, we will close the opponent portion of the hearing, and this will officially close the hearing on Senate Bill 178. And committee, on this particular bill, passed the Senate 39-0. We will need to come back on it. I would like to work that bill today if we can agree to suspend the rules and do that, because time is of an essence and we're going to be pretty busy the next few days. So Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee suspend rules for final action consideration on Senate Bill 178.
I have a motion by Representative Hoheisel, a second by Representative Shu to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All those in favor, then please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. We will move to work the bill, and is there a motion on Senate Bill 178? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we pass out Senate Bill 178 favorably.
A second. Representative Shu seconds. Pass out Senate Bill 178, and we do have one amendment in our discussion that was cited by the Bank Commissioner's Office. And David, if you can please display that amendment. It's fairly simple. It takes the amendment that was approved in the Senate and on this bill and moves the exact same wording up, I believe, a couple lines. David, could you go over that for us, and could you put that on your screen and also push it out to Rich?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just 1 second, I'll get it emailed out here. Okay, you should see the balloon on the screen. It should be out emailed here shortly. You go down to the bottom of page 1 of the bill. You see the first part of the amendment is in line 31. We strike state in that's paragraph 2 there. And then the substance of the amendment is then the 3 that is on page 2, the Senate put in. We're striking that from that position and just moving it up a couple lines to line 35 there as this paragraph 3, and it's the same language. The name selected for the trust company shall be different or substantially dissimilar from any other trust company doing business in the state. And then that second sentence would flow through, and then we'd go back to the 4 here. So there'd still be a 1, 2, 3, and 4 required for the bank, the state bank or state trust company naming provisions. It's just really just moving that 3 up a couple of lines to get in the proper place.
Okay, any questions for David on this? Kind of Representative Toplicker?
Just a question about the words substantially dissimilar. I'm sure that you've kicked that around a little bit and come up with those words, but could that be a problem in the future as to what substantially dissimilar means? Because we don't use those words when we talk about banks. We just say that it shall not be the name of any other state bank. But on these, we're saying substantially dissimilar. And Mr. Chairman, I'm just asking that to David, if that's somewhere else in current law, or are we matching something else, or did we just come up with those words because we think that'll be the best we can do? Or so the question to David is, do you foresee any problem in the definition of substantially dissimilar?
David, any answer to that question of Representative Toplicker?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Representative Toplicker is correct. I mean, this is a little different than how we say it for the bank up above. It's just, shall not be the name of any other state bank. So this is a little different to have that substantially dissimilar in there. I might defer that to Melissa or somebody from the bank commissioner's office on that, how they would determine substantially dissimilar, or if that would be a problem, or if that's that's coming from someplace else, because I don't know background on where that language came from, except for it was requested that way. So,
Melissa, you have a comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to address the issue. The mistake we made is we had left in the naming requirements for state banks and applied them to both state banks and state trust companies. And trust companies actually have a different standard in Kansas law. Why they have a different standard, I don't know. I'd have to go back and do the research. I can also ask Scott. But basically, the banking code has the name requirements for banks, which are in lines like 31 through 32, shall not have the name of any other state bank or one doing business in the same city or town or within a 15-mile radius, whereas trust companies have this language about being different or substantially dissimilar. That's why we felt like we needed the amendment. Otherwise, we would be changing the law by putting state banks and trust companies under that naming convention that now only applies to names. The dissimilar standard is what you find in the trust laws for trust companies. So all we're trying to do is continue the current law, which is here's how you name banks and here's how you name state trust companies. We weren't going to try to change that naming convention. Scott, do you have anything to add?
No, that's the way the code was written way back. I believe it was. I think this trust company code was in the 90s. So that was just the language used. I am not sure why it is different than banks, except that they are different types of institutions. So I really can't answer that question as to why there's a different standard.
Bottom line, there are two standards on names, one for state banks and one for state trust companies. And we were adding the one in for state trust companies to keep the law current.
Okay. And that answered your question, Representative Toplicker?
Well, I was thinking of situations like, you know, if that were, I know that line is about trust, but if we were talking about banks and we're thinking about Midwest Bank and Bank of the Midwest, you know, if the trust company was to be that similar of a name with another trust company, would there be a problem in the future because the two names are not substantially dissimilar? And so that's why I asked that question.
Well, they'd be applying to our office. So we would be regulating this to make sure the names meet the standard. So you can't create a bank or a trust company in Kansas without going through our office in the application process.
And so then you would determine whether something was substantially dissimilar.
Yes, we would. And believe me, if a bank or trust company didn't agree with that, they will tell us.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Representative Bergkamp, you had a question? Answered it. Okay. Any other questions just to discuss the amendment? If not, then I would like to officially propose this amendment to Senate Bill 178 and have a second by Representative Hoheisel. Any further discussion on this amendment to Senate Bill 178? I think we covered probably the main part of it. If no further discussion, we'll move to action on the amendment and need a vote. All those in favor of the amendment to Senate Bill 178, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The motion passes, and we're back on Senate Bill 178 as amended. Any further discussion on Senate Bill 178 as amended for our consideration? I don't see anything in this room. Anything on the screen? No? Well, if there's no further questions, we need a motion on our bill as amended. Representative Hoheisel has a motion. We need a second. Representative Shue seconds the motion. All those in favor of passing out Senate Bill 178 as amended, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Opposed, nay. The motion passes, and Senate Bill 178 is passed out favorably. So, committee, I think that concludes our business for today. Now, to give you a little preview for Wednesday, we know that a number of weeks ago we passed out of the committee and passed in the House the sunset extension of the RAWS bill. And the Senate is going to have a hearing on our bill tomorrow. On Wednesday, the plan is for us to have a hearing on the new RAWS bill that was just introduced that has some enhancements to the RAWS. Now, I mean, we're on a very short time frame, so I don't know what will happen, but we will have our hearing on Wednesday. We may also have, it looks like, an informational hearing on a bill that is coming up in the Senate on Wednesday, on tomorrow and Thursday, I believe. We will potentially get that, so we want to just have kind of an informational hearing on this bill tomorrow so we can kind of be up to speed because things could move quickly in the last week. And then on Monday and Wednesday, like I said, please plan on being here in person if you can. If not, be inside the State House because we could have some action because next Monday and Wednesday are our last two committee days for this session. So anything else for the good of the committee this morning that anyone would like to bring up? Well, if not, I think you need to prepare heartily for Wednesday because it'll be St. Patrick's Day. And so we will have a celebration type mode for anyone with the name, last name of Kelly has to have a celebration on St. Patrick's Day. So we will have some hearings and we will, there won't be green beer, but we will at least have a St. Patrick's Day feeling to it. So as that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks.